One of the interesting things with rats is in alcoholism studies, 100% of rats that are introduced to alcohol become addicts.
So as promised, we are doing a follow-up to our last series that we did on addiction.
Or addiction, how are we going to pronounce that?
Addiction, codependence, and relationship dynamics in recovery, which was awesome, and we had so much fun doing, and we really appreciated your guys' feedback. That was super fun to read through.
So what you're about to see is a lost footage episode from 2020. It's just a Q&A episode on addiction and recovery and alcoholism and stuff like that. In 2020, after we finished publishing our first series, we took a day and filmed a Q&A episode because we had so many questions come in from that series. So we took a day to film a Q&A episode, and I lost the footage at some point. I went through a huge move in 2020, and I just recently found it in the middle of another move, just on a USB card in my office stuff. So now we're publishing it 6-7 years later. But at some point the camera cuts out and we don't get to finish the very end of the episode. I'm not sure if the camera actually stopped working or if I actually lost some footage. So I've talked to my dad now, 6-7 years later, and I have compiled our thoughts to actually finish out that episode. So I'll swoop back in at the end and you'll see me here now, 6 years in the future, finishing out our thoughts. I guess that's how it goes with lost footage episodes. It's kind of fun. It reminds me a lot of the very first episode of I Love Lucy. If you know me, you know that I love Lucy. The very first pilot episode of I Love Lucy was also a lost footage episode that had to be recovered, and that's just a fun thing. So here's our lost episode for you.
We have a couple questions that we wanted to cover that we thought were...
There is so much discussion of these particular issues that I'm thinking, oh, this is well worth our time to take an episode on it.
Yeah, so we really appreciate your guys' questions. The one, I'm just going to jump right into it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we got a question from Mariah. Thank you, Mariah. That I was really excited to hear what you had to say about, because I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually really interesting. Mm-hmm. What Mariah asked was, where does hereditary alcoholism come into play? Is that a true thing, or does that stem from generational sin, self-shaming? I know so many people who don't drink because it runs in the family, but is that just because of so much dysfunction within that's passed down?
Yeah. It's a great question.
Like, such an interesting question.
That's right.
So, like, the last few weeks I've just been like, oh, I can't wait for this follow-up episode. I want to know what you're going to say.
Well, and what I first will say is, I have lots and lots and lots of people who ask this. Yeah. That it's just a natural question. And so there's a lot of factors that we'll talk about here. And so, I don't want to get too far off on my ADD tangents, and that's very possible.
That's where we want to go.
Okay. I was going to say, you keep me on track here. Because the whole issue of genetics and addiction is a study all of its own. And there's lots of research, that's available. But it doesn't lead us, I think, to what we want is this nice, clear answer. Yeah. But there have been lots and lots of studies that show us that, so far, anyway, we cannot isolate an alcoholic gene.
Really?
No, we can't. So far, our science or whatever hasn't developed to a point where we can say, okay, this on your DNA predisposes you. Right.
Oh,
and
I thought that was a thing.
Yeah, right. No, there is nothing so far. Okay. All right. So who knows what science will do?
Yeah.
And so what we do understand really is more anecdotal. It is more about, all right, let's look at the big picture. And it may be one day that, some scientist says, oh, here it is. It's right here on this chromosome or whatever. Yeah. But we don't have that. But there's lots of evidence that points to hereditary factors in alcoholism.
Okay.
So there's something there. Part of the question is kind of a universal question in this field of psychology. It's what we call the nature versus nurture question, right? How much of any part of who we are comes from hereditary, our family background, is it in our DNA, etc. And how much of it is environmental? So, whether that's the family interactions or my social system
Right.
or past trauma,
Right.
those kind of things that are more environmental. And so we're trying to divide that. So what Mariah is asking really is, all right, split this for me. Tell me what is what.
Right.
So, question is, what was I born with? And does that set me up?
Right.
Now, clearly, alcoholism runs in families. We can see that,
Right.
that
That's
alcoholics tend to come from alcoholic families. But there are plenty of alcoholics who have no measurable alcoholism in their family system.
Right.
Whether that's just because people didn't drink,
Alcoholics can come from anywhere, right?
Right,
It's not just if alcoholics aren't just from alcoholic families.
Right, so that's the other side of that, is clearly there are alcoholics that don't seem to come from alcoholic families, and there are alcoholic families where there are members that drink responsibly, So if I think of myself with, say, for instance, my dad's family, your grandpa's family, we don't have any record of anybody ever drinking.
Ever.
Yeah, right. There's whoever drank. There is nothing there. So what does that tell us? That gives us no evidence whether there's alcoholism in our genetics,
Right.
because there's been no exposure. Yeah, and so who knows? Yeah. So that's that piece. But clearly, both factors play in because of that kind of evidence.
Right.
There are alcoholics that come from non-alcoholic families. There are alcoholic families that produce people that can drink responsibly.
Right.
So whatever that is, we got to know both factors are at play there.
Right.
And I'm thinking that's what's important for a discussion like this and a question like Mariah's. So, number of studies that reflect the same statistic. All right, here we go. 15% of people, 1 in 6 people who drink regularly, developed what we call alcohol use disorder. That's the term they use in the DSM-5, the
1 in
diagnostic.
6 is huge.
It is huge. It is huge. And that's of people who drink, regularly, which says any one of us, presumably, have a 1 in 6 chance that we'll become alcoholics if we drink.
So does that mean we become dependent on alcohol? What defines alcoholic
Right.
or alcohol misuse
Yeah,
syndrome? What
right,
you
right,
call
yeah,
it?
yeah, alcohol use disorder. So the DSM-5
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of the Bible of diagnoses in mental health. It's a big fat book. It defines diagnostic categories in lots and lots of ways. So
Yeah.
we talk about alcoholism.
Yeah.
The DSM-5 calls it alcohol use disorder.
Okay.
All right, but it is the
It's the same
equivalent.
thing.
It's the same thing. And with the DSM-5, there's a number of factors that make people meet criteria for addiction. And one of those is withdrawal. So if someone is drinking and they're going to stop drinking, they have withdrawal symptoms.
Actual withdrawals.
Absolutely, yeah. Part of those are, some of those are physiological. So, getting the shakes
Yeah.
or increased depression, increased anxiety. If you stop drinking, then you have this agitation,
Right.
which are more physiological.
Right.
And then there are some that are more relational and are more emotional, that you withdraw, you have this craving,
Yeah.
that your reaction changes when you eliminate alcohol from your system. So that's one of the criteria
Yeah.
for that disorder. Another is, we talked about it this way, an alcoholic makes great sacrifices in their life to maintain their relationship with alcohol. It's one of the things
Right.
we talked about.
Yeah.
That's part of the criteria for alcoholism. Yeah, that there is a tolerance for loss and disruption in their life that could be eliminated as alcohol is eliminated, and they choose not to.
Right.
So that's part of the disorder.
Okay.
Another one of the criteria is an increased tolerance for consumption, so that the more you drink, the more you drink.
Right.
And that's true for, drug usage and any kind of
yeah.
addiction, is you have this increased tolerance. And so
Right.
you drink more
Right.
because you're drinking. And so all of those kind of go into that category, alcohol use disorder,
Okay.
that we call alcoholism.
Right.
And so for me, when I'm talking to someone who is, we're exploring the use of alcohol, I weigh very heavily in that area of are you willing to sacrifice to keep your relationship with the substance, and so your spouse left you, your kids don't talk to you, you lost a job and you got a DUI and you're still drinking. That's a very strong statement.
Right.
And that's part of that alcohol use disorder. So when we talk about what's an alcoholic, that's kind of the categories we're talking about.
Okay.
And so when we look at a family tree and we see Uncle Herman here and Grandpa and this cousin and these people clearly meet this criteria, then we'd say, okay, it looks for all the world like there's something in that family tree that leads towards alcoholism. Now then the question will always be, well, is that because they grew up with an alcoholic parent?
Right.
Or is that because there's something genetic, there's a predisposition for it?
Yeah.
And so, like I say, right now we don't have hard science for that, but we do see the themes and patterns. Now,
But I mean, everything you're saying kind of just points back to nurture. Right?
yeah, except that we do see exceptions to that, where we'd see families where there was no alcoholism.
Alcohol.
And we have an alcoholic. We'd say,
Yeah.
okay, well,
Where did
if
that
we
come
look at a
from?
family system that looks very functional, who knows, you never know what goes on behind the curtain,
Right,
but
right.
it looks for all the world like there isn't that environment that is,
Right.
promoting alcoholism, and we have an alcoholic here, so we'd say, okay, something else is at play here, whatever that is. And so that's why this is kind of an eternal question for us right
Yeah.
now. It's well worth exploring.
Yeah.
So another thing that's worth, at least examining is there's a whole bunch of studies that are about rats, all right?
Right.
So studies
Right.
on rats. Here's what they find in rats. In rat studies where they are given alcohol, 100% of rats become alcoholics. So now how do you measure that? They can't mix their own drinks. They can't
Wait,
stop
but-
at the bar. I don't know how they do that.
That's crazy.
It is crazy that, okay, so in that, the nature versus nurture thing, do they all come from alcoholic rat families? I don't think so. I don't know how they figure that.
Okay, but why do we drink?
Or are all rats really depressed and they need to escape that?
Escape.
I don't know. Because,
Wow.
like you and I talked about in our episode on addiction, is the reason why we drink has to do with emotions.
Right.
Is that, my classic mantra is, this isn't about thirst. Alcoholic doesn't drink because there's thirst. They got lots of options for thirst.
Yeah.
They drink because they're escaping. They're
Well,
looking
even-
for self-medication.
Even if we're talking about social drinking, even if we're not
Right.
talking about alcoholism, we're talking about social drinking. We're talking about, we're girlfriends at the bar and we're saying, get some liquid courage.
Yeah, right,
you're
right.
numbing your...
Inhibitions?
Yes.
Lowers your inhibitions. Okay.
We're purposely
Got it.
lowering our inhibitions.
Right.
There's a reason we drink alcohol, not just
Yes.
alcoholics. Alcohol use in general is to
Right.
lower our inhibitions,
Right.
to be able to have more comfortable conversation, to be able to dance more freely, to be able to
Right.
enjoy our world more for however many
Right.
hours we want to drink, right? So there's
Right.
there's this purpose to alcohol.
Right. Yeah. And then of course the stories come from our inhibitions are down, and then we do stupid things.
And then we do stupid things.
Right, and we say stupid things, etc.
Right.
Because those inhibitions come down,
Right.
and those inhibitions, while they are motivated by anxiety, they also serve a function.
Right, a
Yeah,
very
I can
important
empathize
function.
because of my anxiety,
Yeah.
and I lower that, and then I can
And I
hurt
don't
people's
do
feelings.
stupid things.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But so then, I don't know how we got off on that, but
Yeah.
that is a function. I don't know how that works with rats, but
Yeah.
we know that 100% figure does not
Hmm.
work for humans.
Mm-hmm.
We know that not 100%. There are plenty of folks that drink responsibly, but 1 in 6 statistically come back to this place of, they develop this inability or this great difficulty to not continually rely on that, not just to lower inhibitions, but to manage bad feelings,
Yeah.
depression, anxiety,
So interesting.
Yeah. And so 1 in 6. So I think that's a good figure to keep in mind with this nature versus nurture figure.
Yeah.
Is because it's 1 in 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, that also indicates that both of those are at play.
Mm-hmm.
So another factor that plays into this is that there are genetic predispositions to emotional disorders.
There are. That's
There
like
are,
proven.
yes. And so
Okay.
we know that depression has genetic roots. Not always, because there's many types of depression.
Right.
But we do know that there are certain types of depression that run in families that are physiological.
Okay.
You know, we know the same about anxiety.
Like actual like chemical.
Right. Yeah.
Chemical.
Low serotonin,
Okay.
that kind of thing that we
Yeah.
can see. Okay, yeah, this is a family trait.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those same predispositions heavily influence alcohol use.
Right.
And so we can say, well, we can't isolate a gene of alcoholism. We can do that with emotional disorders, and that's what alcoholics work to medicate.
Right.
And so then we can say, okay, back to that nurture nature thing is, all right, well, maybe it's not alcoholism, but there is a predisposition towards wanting to modify or medicate something
Right.
that then leads towards, you know, alcoholism.
Alcohol.
Now, if you come from a family where that is a common defense, then we can, okay, well, there's a connection,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that, oh, your family has a predisposition towards, you know, emotional struggles, and alcohol's available.
Right. Alcohol is the family's choice of self-medication.
Right. Yeah.
Here's my question. With all this, we're talking specifically about hereditary alcoholism because that's what Mariah asked about.
Right.
But as you're talking, I'm wondering about addictive personality.
Right,
That's the
right,
thing that
right.
we always talk about. It's like, oh, addiction runs in my family.
Right.
You're not talking about alcohol necessarily. You're talking about your uncle who's addicted to heroin and your cousin who's addicted to whatever. You know, like
Right.
there's
Yeah,
so
aunt who's a
many addictions.
gambler or
Right.
whatever.
It's
Yes,
just
right.
the addictive personality, which
Right.
and like things like, you know, I have friends who you know have smoked for 30 years and
Right.
they're never going to kick it. I smoked for years through high school
Mhm.
and it was not even like I just stopped.
Yeah,
And I've
right.
never felt, you know what I mean? Like I've
Right.
I've always just thought I just don't have an addictive personality.
Right.
But so when we're talking about kind of hereditary addictions, hereditary alcoholism, is that her like there is no DNA thing proven
Right.
for alcoholism?
Right.
Is this true? Everything you've been talking about, is that true for like an RNA addictive personality type
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Is it all the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think the answer is the same, is that we don't have genetic studies that clearly determine physiological
Like
basis.
if you drink, you're going to be addicted.
Right.
If this person drinks, it's not going to matter. There's no way to say like, hey, let's test your DNA. Like you're a
Yes.
natural addict
Right.
to anything. Be careful.
We don't
don't
have
have
that
that.
physiologically.
Okay.
On the other hand, we can look at history and say, okay,
Right.
this person is impulsive. Okay, they have a long history from junior high school.
Yeah.
They just do whatever they feel. All right, so that's a person who is driven by emotion. All right, and then we'd say, okay, that tends to be the kind of characteristic that leads a person into compulsive behaviors, meaning they are managing emotions through something they do out here.
Right.
So we can't isolate the gene, but we can say that's an addictive personality.
Okay.
Do you follow me? It's okay,
Yeah.
they do that. And so, again, it isn't this nice, solid, clean
Yeah.
thing that says, okay, you got this, you know,
Yeah.
this DNA factor.
It's not an
But we
easy
can say
answer.
your history, while you're not addicted to anything, we look at your history and say, oh, this is how you operate. You regularly overdo things.
Right.
You know, you get overly focused on your studies. You get overly focused on exercise. You get over, and it just isn't something we call bad.
Right.
But we'd say, you do a lot of that. You are
Mhm.
constantly pursuing things that manage internal emotions through something external. And we'd say, beware. Just beware. That's a tough.
Yeah.
That's a bad place to start.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
even though we can't say, you know, it's physiological.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, if we talk about the bottom line, what do we do with this kind of data?
Yeah.
Important that if you come from a family where there are alcoholics, that's not good news. Do you follow me? That
Right,
maybe
yeah.
you're not, maybe you are, but okay, we got this factor that you got to pay attention to. And you can say, my dad was an alcoholic and I'm never going to be like that. Okay, that's a great goal. On the other hand, your biology may not cooperate. You know, it may not be just a matter of self-discipline for you. And clearly that's a factor in a lot of alcoholics. It's not just self-discipline, just discipline yourself. Because, like we said in our episode, this is not about stopping drinking. there are alcoholics who stop drinking, who the whole thing of dry drunks is,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this isn't just about consuming alcohol. There are many pieces to this.
Yeah.
And so just to say, Dad was an alcoholic, I'm never going to do that. Okay, yeah, but you may find it's not quite that easy.
Right.
What we do know, we know that once that addictive cycle has begun, it is only broken through great effort.
Okay.
And that effort is 100% yours.
Right.
You follow me?
Right.
No one can get you out of this,
Right.
and nobody can change this for you. So once you're in that cycle, you're in a difficult place.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not you are predisposed towards addiction isn't knowable until you're stuck.
Oof.
That's the old saying, if you choose to drink responsibly, and good luck with that.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you
Right.
won't know for sure
What is-
until you're in it.
The phrase an ounce of prevention is worth
A ton of
ton
cure.
of- yeah.
Right.
Like,
It's a lot easier on
Yeah.
the front end.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the question comes down to is what can I use as an indicator that I need to beware, and some kind of genetic proof isn't going to be there,
Right.
but just beware that, oh my gosh, the stakes are very high. Once you're in that cycle, you're the only answer, and you need to be very, very cautious.
Yeah.
And part of that comes back to, why am I drinking? Do I find when I'm not drinking, I'm depressed? There's probably healthier ways to deal with that depression,
well, we gotta figure out why you're depressed. then.
Exactly, right.
So yeah.
So, Mariah's question was great.
Okay, so to answer Mariah's question,
Yeah,
generally,
right. It's not-
there's not really a hard cut answer. It's just, no, hereditary alcoholism is definitely a thing.
Right, it is a thing. We can't prove it in concrete science.
It's not, what do you call it, physiologically
Right.
proven. There's
Yeah.
no DNA thing that we can pull out and say, here it is, this is an alcoholism
Right.
piece.
Yeah, right.
But
it's-
generally, it's pretty proven.
Yeah, it's obvious that there's a piece.
You can see
Right.
it's there.
Yeah.
There's
there.
no scientific proof.
Right.
But we
know, yes.
we know that it's there.
Yeah, all the evidence points to that.
Right.
And so,
Whether it's because her question was more like, I know people who don't drink because it runs in the family, but is that
Yes.
just because of the dysfunction that's passed down within the family,
Right.
or an actual DNA, RNA
right.
piece?
Yes. And so my answer to that person would be, yeah, it's both.
It's both.
It's both. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's a good idea to
Right.
be very, very cautious.
Right.
Because it's more than likely.
Because whether or not it's because of family dysfunction or because of
Right.
some sort of DNA thing,
Yeah.
just
Right.
be careful.
Yeah, just be careful. Because the bad news is it's very likely in a system like that there is some kind of genetic predisposition that we can't measure.
Right.
And that would mean once you start, there is a loss of control. It's something you don't manage. It's not just self-discipline for you. And 1 in 6, adults, that's
And
true. They can't just stop.
100% of rats.
And rats, if you're a rat, if you're listening right now and
screwed.
you're a rat, yeah, you are in a bad place. Yeah, just stay away from alcohol. No responsible drinking for you. So, but I do think that's the bottom line
Okay.
is just beware that 1 in 6, and what does 1 in 6, what they find is, I can't stop. I can't manage it. Ooh,
That's so
that's a
scary.
bummer to discover after you're already in it,
Yeah.
And 1 in 6 is significant.
Yeah. Oof. I'm just thinking of a conversation I had with a friend the other night. Like
Yeah.
casual conversation with a group of friends.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like detoxing because I've been and I
Yes.
detox all the time, right?
Yeah, right.
Like I'm constantly detoxing. and they were talking about not drinking for a month
Yeah.
or a week. It was only 1 week.
Yes.
And they were like, "Oh, it was so hard." And I was like,
Yeah, wait.
"Ooh.
Are you listening?
1 week?"
Yeah, right.
Ooh.
Yeah.
How do I be a good friend in this moment and say, if
yeah.
it's hard for you to stay away from, like, I mean, again, maybe I just don't have an addictive personality, but I can go a week without drinking and not even think about it or
Right,
notice, right? A week, a month, I could go 6 months probably
right,
without
right.
even noticing,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Right.
that was scary to hear.
Right.
But that's the thing is, everyone at the table agreed. in this friend group, and
Yeah, right.
that is what scared me.
Yeah.
Was that,
Right.
oh wow, this is a very generally accepted thing that alcohol is a part of life.
Yeah.
That alcohol culture.
Right.
Oof.
And then for those folks in that culture that all accept it,
Mm-hmm.
it is not going to be recognizable to them until they have made significant losses
Right.
that they've sacrificed. And then they look back and say, oh, I wish I could have known. I wish I could have seen that. But denial is so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really so powerful and so reinforced.
Right.
In our culture,
Exactly.
right? In that friend group, I
Yep.
was like the only one that was like,
Right.
okay. I think that's
Yeah.
what they call the party pooper.
Yes, right. I think that's the term they use for it, right? And so that revelation might be relegated to one-on-one conversations where it kind of naturally comes to the surface.
Or
not
when they all
enough-
watch this video.
Right, right. Well, and you know, like you said in the introductory video, this is what we're trying to do is
Yeah.
stimulate conversations between
Yeah.
people that you draw your own conclusions, do what you want with it. Let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's just examine
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And if you disagree, it's not a problem.
Right. Just
Yeah.
bring more self-awareness to you.
Right. Right.
Everything
Yeah.
around you, you know, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
worth talking about.
Well, and you know, as we get these responses and people respond and comment, it is so not offensive for people to disagree. That is
right.
so welcome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we want that. Don't
Yeah.
think for a second you're going to offend us
The world
by
doesn't
questioning it.
keep turning without differing opinions.
Right.
Right.
And so really what we want to do is stimulate conversation,
Exactly.
not state some kind of ultimate truth that everybody
Yeah.
has to accept. It's let's talk about this. This is important stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway, so
Next question. Very general. Many people ask,
right.
in recovery,
Yeah.
are programs like AA or other 12-step like an actual program,
Right.
is that necessary for recovery?
Right. Yeah. I hear that a lot, and it's
Yeah.
been a very, very good question.
Yeah.
Things like Celebrate Recovery,
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholics Anonymous, those 12-step programs, there are certainly plenty of people who recover from alcoholism, at least as we measure it, who aren't involved in a recovery program.
Okay.
So, all right, we'll take that, you know.
Okay, but are those people recovering from alcoholism or are they dry drunks? That's my question.
Exactly, right. And so when we're talking about culture in general, I don't know, you know, number one, how do you measure it and how are you ever going to see that in a research study to find a statistic? So we don't have that. But we do know factors that are essential in recovery.
Okay.
Okay? And I think that's where we need to focus. And so I think we did a lot of that in our, both with addiction, you know, chemical addiction, and then codependency. We kind of went through, what does it take? What does a person need to break these patterns? For everybody who's listening, if you've watched our, you know, earlier videos, recovery has many factors to it. An alcoholic in recovery isn't defined by the amount of alcohol he does or doesn't consume. That's not the issue.
Right.
It's about lifestyle, it's about perspective, it's about a cognitive transition that went from here to here that is about being in recovery. That's why people who are in recovery, they can say, oh yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Oh, when's the last time you drank? Well, 40 years ago. Well, you're in recovery 40 years?
Yeah.
Right. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about not consuming alcohol. We're talking about a life change that was focused on one thing and now it's focused on another. And so we talk about a recovery program, that's what we're talking about. People in AA or in Celebrate Recovery, while they may measure recovery by, here's the day, I've been sober 2 years, I've been sober 6 months, etc. Right, that's about a behavior. I stopped drinking such and such. Now, where are you on the 12 steps? Where are you in your recovery? Different question.
Okay.
And it's far more significant. So, because there are many parts to recovery, we answer this question in many parts. When we're talking about the 12 steps, we're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, we're talking about Celebrate Recovery, we're talking about essentially the 12 steps. Those 12 steps are integrating multiple principles that are a part of recovery. And
Right.
not drinking really isn't even mentioned in
not
the 12
one of the
steps.
steps,
Exactly. It's
right?
not one of the steps.
Oh,
Right.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Wait,
yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, like in the 12 steps. That's really interesting. I've
Yes.
never thought about that.
Right.
Spent a lot of time thinking about addiction.
Right.
I've never thought about that. None of the
Yes.
12 steps is stop drinking.
Right. Important
it's
feature.
it's
right.
all, it's 100% about this, everything underneath.
Right.
That is awesome.
Yes.
That's
right.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's important. It's an important piece.
Yeah, that's a very important piece. This
Right.
is not about, it's not about stopping your action. Stopping
Right.
your action is very important. But
Yes.
you can stop your action and still be effed up
Right.
underneath. Right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
it's not about stopping the action. It's about just dealing with what's in here.
Right.
Right? Oh, that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, one feature that's true for every addict, and that is on some level, every addict is trying to manage what they can't control. Now, that may be fears, hurts, maybe historical trauma, things that I can't control. But what I can do is muffle the alarm. I can shut this voice up that
Right.
says, I don't like me. I don't like this thing.
Yeah.
And so the 12 steps begins with that. That's where it begins. It doesn't begin with don't drink anymore. The first of the 12 steps is we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and that our lives had become unmanageable.
Right.
That is a cognitive transition. It happens up here. This isn't about behavior. The 12 steps don't begin with a behavior. They begin with a change in perspective. And that perspective was about accepting helplessness. That's important in any recovery.
Yeah.
And it's not about no longer drinking, because once you stop drinking, this stuff comes to the surface.
Right.
All this stuff that you have kept at bay now comes full force.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. And so every addict who is going to stop drinking or using or spending or eating or whatever is going to have to face that when they stop this primary defense. That's an important piece. All right. So in a recovery program, that's where we start. So if you're in AA or you're in CR, what you're going to be faced with right off the bat is, here's where we start. We don't start with controlling the behavior. We start by changing our perspective that we're helpless and that's life.
And what's the phrase?
We admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and our lives had become unmanageable.
Unmanageable.
Right.
Okay.
That's step one. Now, from step one moving forward, there are various things. Some of them are behavioral,
Right.
that we admit to ourselves, to one other person, to God. So we have this selected community where we begin confessing,
Right.
admitting our powerlessness and the wrongs we have committed. All right?
Right.
That's not a change in perspective. That's a behavior.
That's an
that I've
action.
got to do this, right? Part of the 12 steps is making amends. Now, this is down the road. Okay, now that I have worked through these earlier steps, now I need to go back and make things right. Now, that's a clearing of the conscience. That is a behavioral thing. And I'm thinking that's, of all the steps, that's probably the one that's nobody looks forward
so
to.
hard, yeah.
Exactly. But that is where that's where a life change begins. That's where old support systems begin to emerge, where we start rebuilding old broken relationships,
Yeah.
etc. It is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. But so then as we go through these 12 steps, some of them are cognitive, attitudinal, etc., changing something
Right.
inside. Some of them are external, they're changing a behavior.
Right.
But they're all these are components to any recovery. If we're not going to be dry drunks, just stop drinking and keep living the same way we did, all of these pieces are a part of the puzzle that have to be faced. In any recovery, the recovering person is going to need to develop some kind of, we use a lot of different terms, confidence, trust, faith in something outside themselves.
Right.
Because like you and I have said a number of times, it's not just about self-discipline. Self-discipline is going to be a part of it because you're going to have to be committed to these changes.
Right.
But it's not just about self-discipline. That's what the first step says we are powerless, our lives become unmanageable. For them to become manageable, there needs to be something outside myself that I then put my faith in. I need to realize there's something bigger than me here.
Because that is part of like AA, which is secular, right?
Right.
But it's all about the higher power, like
Right.
finding something outside of yourself.
Right. And so even for people who are defensive about anything religious or
Right.
faith-based, but they're in a recovery program, sorry, you got to do something with this,
Interesting.
you know? And that's where like Celebrate Recovery, which is very faith-based,
Right.
it's the same program. It just identifies where that faith lies,
Right.
you know? But one way or another, recovery is going to be dealing with my helplessness and things that I cannot control. Because what I've done with my addiction is I have just worked at ignoring that.
Right.
You know, convincing myself I really can control this, where all I'm doing is controlling the
No.
alarms that go off
Right.
inside me that
You're
says
not
something's wrong.
Controlling the actual anything,
Right.
you're just pushing it away.
Right. Yeah. And so whether I'm in a recovery program or not in a recovery program, these are essential pieces. I have to
Okay.
do something with that. You know,
Yeah.
the helplessness, the avoidance, and all that stuff. And the fact that I can't just flex my muscles and get through this.
Right.
I need to change something.
Yeah.
Now, another piece for anybody who is serious about recovery is they're going to need a support system. Again, you and I talked about that. We
Yeah.
talked about, you know, both the addiction and the codependent. I'm going to need a support system. I need people around me to help me through this. I'm going to need people who understand and are empathetic to my struggle, so that I don't have to be defensive with them. I don't have to
Right.
hide things and manage things with them.
Right.
And it takes a while to develop, you know, people that you trust. I need people who have personal insights from their own experience so they can relate to me.
Okay.
So that I can say, yeah, they know what they're talking about. I can trust them. I need people who are honestly invested in my progress. Not people that are just giving lip service to it. You know, not someone who just gives me lectures about what's true, but someone who really will hurt when I relapse. People who are scared when I'm not serious. You know, those
Right.
people who are connected with me. I need people that I can help also. So as I grow, I have an outlet to these insights that I have. And all of those are components to a support system. In AA and in CR, that's a very sweet package, because all this comes in one package.
Right.
You know, you got the 12
Right.
steps, you got a support system, you got people who will be trustworthy. Not
Right.
everybody, but there
No,
are
but
people there.
You'll choose who is trustworthy.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And you will choose someone to come under, a sponsor or whatever,
Right.
who you choose because you admire them and what they're doing and how they're developing. And it takes a while.
Yeah.
You will find people along the way who will come to you and say, would you be my sponsor? You will come, people who will say, oh, I want to be where you are. Oh, that is very reinforcing. It's very rewarding. And outside of a program, that's a lot of work to find these things.
Yeah.
Whereas you get into a support system, you get into a recovery program, it comes to you. It's all there.
Yeah.
Now it's scary to go in for the first time and sit through the first couple meetings and kind of watch these people and see.
Yeah.
And every group has a different personality. So you may go to one CR group or an AA group and it doesn't connect. You don't feel it. Go once or twice. This isn't a place for me. Find another one.
Yeah.
You know, here in the Puget Sound area, I always say, you want an AA group? 24/7. You want one at 3 in the morning? You can find
You got
one
it.
somewhere here all the time. There's a group. And if it doesn't fit you, there's a program that will fit you somewhere.
Okay, so this is where the camera cut out. Don't know where the rest of the footage is. Doesn't matter, because we're going to finish it now. I have notes here that I'm going to be reading from. I apologize if that's distracting, but I really wanted to make sure that my dad's voice made it in here, and we live in different states now, so this is the best we can do until he can come film with me again, but that's not going to be for a few months. So, short answer to this question is no, you don't have to be involved in AA or Celebrate Recovery or some sort of 12-step program to have a successful recovery. But there's a handful of things, a handful of elements that go into a successful recovery, which we've gone through on some of our other episodes. We've gone through it on the addiction episode, codependence, and the relationship dynamics in recovery episodes. All of those are included in those discussions, but for the sake of this, answering this question here, there's a few elements that do go into a successful recovery. I will go through them as quick as I can, but the second half of the short answer is that programs like AA and Celebrate Recovery and other 12-step programs essentially already have all of these elements wrapped up in a pretty package available for people to just plug into. So you can go through the effort of building all of those elements on your own. You absolutely can. You absolutely can. But you can also just plug right into a 12-step program and a group that can support you through recovery. That's why my dad specifically will recommend programs like that, because everything's already just at your disposal. So anyway, so the elements that my dad wanted to make sure we covered were that you do want to be able to have people around you who actually truly care about you, who you can trust or at least develop trust in, who are willing to learn about addiction and learn about addiction in general, but also learn about your specific addiction and your specific triggers and struggles. Probably most importantly, people who are willing to and hopefully good at confronting you in love. Now, not in a way that's going to drive you away or drive you back into addiction, but being able to confront you, and people that can do that and you can actually receive that from. And this might not be 100% necessary, but ideally you will have people around you who have like first hand understanding of their own recovery, hopefully with some success. And like I said, AA and similar groups like that already have all these things in place. So like I said, you can absolutely go through the effort of building your own independent version of this and making sure the people around you are the people that I just described. Maybe just fair warning, it can be difficult and it can take a lot of time to develop something like that. You can just saddle up to an existing structure. Now, regardless of if you pursue an actual recovery group or building your own recovery outside of some sort of 12-step program, a few notes that my dad really wanted to make sure that we included in this video for those of you that are ready to start pursuing recovery or are supporting someone who's ready to start recovery. You want to study yourself, study your own substance usage patterns. I mean substance in the way, like whatever your compulsion is, whether it's alcohol, masturbation, gambling, shopping, some sort of hard drug, like whatever it is. Study your substance usage patterns. What triggers you? What triggers you to use? And the way that he worded that was, what are the components to your vulnerability to relapse? What triggers you to relapse? What puts you into a weak position? Vulnerability, he wanted to make sure everybody knew. HALT, H-A-L-T, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Very common trigger points for people in general. And there's plenty of others, but these are like the big major ones that are very common. So just pay attention to those things in yourself and learn to manage your vulnerabilities, like being hungry and tired. Learn to manage those vulnerabilities before they develop into a monster and actually trigger you. So how to regulate your system when something like that happens and stay out of some sort of substance use or substance abuse. So those are your do's. These are your develops. You want to develop personal limits and boundaries that you can actually commit to, regardless of others' desires or opinions, like, come on, man, it's just one drink, it's a special occasion, you're no fun anymore, things like that. So develop your own personal boundaries and limits, something you can commit to. So like if you know you have a tendency to abuse alcohol, and you really have a hard time resisting it in like a party or celebration setting, maybe there's a period of time that you don't go to parties. And yeah, sure, you're not fun anymore, but you're healthy. And these are really important personal limits and boundaries to have. So you get to decide what your boundaries are. You get to decide what your limits are. And you don't have to bend to anybody else's opinions of you. And then one One little note of beware he gave me was that recovery is a lifestyle. Recovery is not a season. It's an absolute lifestyle. It's not like a temporary project. So don't imagine you'll ever be like over it in a month or a year. You are literally developing an entire new way to live and perceive life. There's just no shortcuts. It's a long-term lifestyle. So be prepared for that and don't be discouraged. You're developing a whole new life. So whatever you or your loved ones decide to do right now in this very tender season of maybe choosing recovery for the first time, we know that you can do it. You have it in you, and we wish you the absolute best in your recovery journey. You got this. Okay, I think that's all. Then we will see you in the next one.